The boardroom carried that particular scent of expensive furniture and calculated ambition, the kind of environment where fortunes change hands every few months. I paused at the entrance, clutching a thin leather portfolio, watching my sister Victoria do what she did best, perform competence for an audience. She commanded the head of a massive mahogany table built for 20, presentation clicker in hand, walking Meridian Tech Solutions board through third-quarter projections. This was the software company our father had grown from a spare bedroom over 3 decades. She hadn't noticed me yet. Neither had anyone else. I'd dressed with intention that morning. Navy blazer, understated accessories, hair neatly pulled back, calculated inconspicuousness. In my capacity as interim CEO, Victoria declared, I've pinpointed several areas where we're bleeding money unnecessarily. The Veteran Employment Initiative, for example, is dragging margins down by 2.3% every year. She called it sentimental charity work our father had insisted on. That initiative had connected 847 military veterans with technology careers across 6 years. Our father, himself a Marine, had considered it the ethical backbone of everything he'd built. Victoria considered it a liability. Then her eyes found me. Her expression shifted immediately, jaw locking into that subtle tightening she'd been perfecting since we were children whenever someone disrupted her version of events. Emma, why are you here? This meeting is closed. I'm attending, I replied evenly, moving toward an open seat. You're not a board member. You don't even work here anymore. She pivoted toward Martin, the head of security position near the exit. Martin, please remove my sister from the premises. Personal family disputes don't belong in professional settings. Martin was 53 years old, former Army, brought aboard 8 years ago during my tenure as VP of Operations. I'd personally championed his application, overriding HR's hesitation about a gap in his employment record following combat deployment. I'd recognized capability where others saw a question mark. He cleared his throat with deliberate weight. Miss Anderson acquired 51.7% controlling interest last week through the estate settlement provisions. Beginning Monday morning, she holds majority ownership. He let that sink in completely. She is your incoming CEO. The silence that followed was absolute, the variety of quiet that arrives just before everything shifts permanently. Victoria's complexion went pale. That's not possible. The shares were split down the middle. I received half, she received half. Not entirely accurate, I said, settling into the chair positioned directly opposite her. The portfolio landed softly on the polished surface between us. Dad's will divided his 70% ownership equally between us, 35% apiece. But Mom held her own 30% independently. You forgot to account for Mom's shares. I had learned the architecture of ownership the difficult way. Following Dad's funeral 8 months prior, Victoria had immediately installed herself as interim CEO, telling everyone I was too emotionally compromised for business decisions. She informed the board I needed time to process loss. She told our mother I was experiencing a breakdown and shouldn't be burdened with company matters. What Victoria hadn't anticipated was how I'd actually been spending those 8 months. Rather than grieving, I'd been excavating, tracing patterns of manipulation that stretched back through decades of shared history. Mom sold me her 30% stake for precisely what she'd originally paid in 1998, $180,000. Not because I'd asked, but because 8 months of watching Victoria operate had shown her exactly what kind of calculation lived behind her daughter's eyes. The same cold arithmetic she'd once recognized in her own mother, who had stolen her inheritance back in 1973. The transfer was entirely legal, I continued. Mom's attorney, Judge Morrison, a retired family court judge who handled Dad's estate, verified and certified everything. The formal notification was filed last Monday. I now hold 51.7%. You hold 35%. The remaining 13.3% sits in employee stock options. Victoria's hands began trembling against the table edge. You went behind my back. I pursued proper legal channels, I replied. Unlike the methods you've been employing. I opened the portfolio. Each page inside represented a small, precise detonation waiting to happen. This document summarizes the financial decisions you've made as interim CEO across 8 months of what you've been calling modernization. I extracted the first sheet. June 15th, you eliminated the Veteran Employment Program. Annual savings of $340,000. You also dissolved the hiring coordinator position, terminating Sarah Vance, a Marine Corps veteran holding 3 Purple Hearts who had personally placed 127 veterans into careers. Board member Patricia Chen, who oversaw HR, shifted visibly in her chair. She hadn't known Sarah's background. Victoria had described it to her as a redundant administrative role. July 3rd, you sold our community training facility for $1.8 million to a real estate developer. That center had offered free programming courses to underserved populations since Dad launched it in 2016. Over 7 years, it trained 2,430 individuals, 64% of whom we subsequently hired. I pushed copies toward board members around the table. The purchasing entity was Pinnacle Development LLC, incorporated in Delaware 3 months before the transaction closed. Sole owner listed Victoria Anderson. You sold company property to yourself at 40% beneath its actual value. An independent appraisal placed the building at $3.1 million. The atmosphere in the room seemed to physically cool. Board member Richard Torres, our CFO, drew the documents toward himself, his expression hardening as he reviewed the figures. August 10th, you increased your own compensation from $180,000 to $420,000 with immediate effect, citing market rate adjustments for the CEO role. Actual market rate for a CEO of our company's scale sits at approximately $280,000. You awarded yourself a 133% raise while simultaneously cutting programs for veterans. Victoria pushed back her chair and rose abruptly, the legs scraping the floor. I was running this entire organization while I was what? I kept my voice steady. Grieving? I was documenting. Dad taught me that approach. He used to say that in business, written records defeat verbal claims every single time. The psychological principle known as the sunk cost fallacy. Continuing to invest in something based on what's already been spent rather than what the evidence currently shows. Our family had been feeding Victoria's narrative of competence for 38 years, perpetually convinced the eventual payoff was overdue. But certain systems are built to never deliver. There's a manipulation pattern called narcissistic triangulation, where someone establishes themselves as the sole authority by quietly severing connections between others. Victoria had executed it with genuine skill. She told the board I was unavailable. She told our mother I was unstable. She told our younger brother Daniel I was being difficult. Each relationship strategically poisoned so nobody ever compared accounts. Until Mom called Daniel in September, and Daniel called me, and the 3 of us gathered in Mom's kitchen one Thursday afternoon and began assembling the actual picture from scattered fragments. She told me you wanted nothing to do with the company, Mom had said quietly, that it reminded you too painfully of your father. She told me you were struggling with anxiety attacks, Daniel added, that raising business topics would set you back. I'd shown them the text messages I'd sent Victoria over that period. 47 separate attempts across 6 months asking about board activity, financial decisions, and company direction. Messages she'd answered with "I'll handle it," or "this isn't a good time," or simply left unanswered entirely. "Family isn't always the people who share your genetics," Mom had said at last. "It's the people who show up when biology alone isn't sufficient." That was the afternoon she offered to sell me her shares. Back in the boardroom, I continued through the portfolio, each page quietly dismantling the story Victoria had been telling. September 22nd, you attempted to sell Meridian's proprietary software licensing to Cortex Systems for $4.2 million. Market analysis indicates this licensing is valued at $11.8 million. You were offloading company intellectual property to a direct competitor at a massive discount. I produced another page. Cortex's VP of Acquisitions is James Morrison, your fiancé. This is the internal email chain discussing the arrangement, including his note that reads, "Once this closes, we can finally begin work on the villa." Patricia drew a sharp breath. Richard's face had gone crimson. October 5th, you terminated Michael Torres, our lead developer, citing performance deficiencies. Michael carried a 98% code efficiency rating and had personally built 3 of our core product features. His termination papers slid across the table toward the board. He had also been raising questions about the Cortex transaction. His severance agreement contained a mandatory NDA imposing $500,000 penalties for any criticism of company decisions. Judge Morrison had reviewed that NDA, labeled it an unreasonable suppression of speech, and advised Michael he had strong grounds to contest it. Michael was already working with an employment attorney. "You've been methodically dismantling everything our father created," I said. "Not to strengthen the company, to extract value from it before it collapsed." Victoria's voice fractured. "You have absolutely no idea what it demands to lead a company. You were always his favorite." "I served as VP of Operations for 6 years," I said. "I built the entire project management infrastructure from scratch. I personally negotiated our 3 largest contracts. I created the veteran hiring program that you've been calling charity." I leaned slightly forward. "And yes, Dad and I were close because we operated from shared principles. We believed that financial performance and human purpose could occupy the same space. There is an emotional ledger that exists beneath financial spreadsheets, a running account of invisible costs accumulated over years. I had been compiling mine for months." Thanksgiving 2018, Victoria announced her engagement at the same dinner where I just received a major promotion. My news received 3 minutes of acknowledgement. Her relationship consumed 3 hours of celebration. The cost? A professional milestone permanently overshadowed. During Dad's cancer treatment in 2023, I took extended family leave to manage medical appointments, coordinate care, and research treatment options. Victoria visited twice across 6 months, both visits oriented around business decisions she was preparing to make. The cost? The weight of caregiving carried almost entirely alone. At the funeral, my eulogy ran 847 words centered on Dad's values, his commitment to veterans, his belief in human potential. Victoria spoke for 4 minutes about continuing his business legacy and honoring his professional success. She never once mentioned a single person he'd helped. The cost? An authentic farewell to his character replaced by a branding exercise, and the accumulated weight of every family gathering where Victoria positioned herself as the accomplished one, the pragmatic one, the daughter who truly understood how business functioned, while I was cast as too sensitive, too idealistic, insufficiently strategic. The cost? Decades of gradual erosion of self-worth. Real accountability isn't powered by rage. It's patience that has been refined into precision. "I'm calling for an emergency vote," I announced, "to remove Victoria from her interim CEO position and establish permanent leadership. I'm simultaneously recommending an immediate forensic audit covering all transactions during her 8-month tenure. Richard moved his laptop closer. I'll second that motion. As majority shareholder, I'm authorizing the audit independent of the vote outcome, I added. But I want the board's alignment on this. The vote was unanimous, 8-0. Victoria abstained, her expression one of total disbelief. I'm also reinstating the Veteran Employment Program effective immediately. Sarah Vance will be contacted about resuming her role as coordinator with a formal institutional apology and full back pay for wrongful termination. Michael Torres will receive an offer to return under his original terms. Patricia was already writing. The training center transaction is being contested. The $1.8 million proceeds will be returned with applicable penalties for self-dealing. If Pinnacle Development LLC disputes this, we will pursue civil fraud charges. You're destroying my life, Victoria whispered. I'm undoing the destruction you created, I said. Those are entirely different things. The process that followed unfolded with precise methodical momentum. During the first week, forensic accountants from Brennan and Associates arrived and spent days analyzing every transaction Victoria had authorized. Their report spanned 180 pages. The summary, $6.7 million in problematic decisions, including undervalued asset sales, inflated consulting payments routed to companies belonging to her associates, and deliberate asset reduction that would have rendered Meridian insolvent within 3 years. During the second week, the board voted to pursue legal remedies. Victoria was formally separated from all positions. Her remaining 35% stake was placed in a restricted trust she could neither access nor sell without board authorization. A legal safeguard our father had built into the company structure for exactly this contingency. None of us had understood why he'd included it until now. He had apparently seen something in Victoria that those closest to her had been too near to recognize clearly. During the third week, the SEC launched an investigation into the self-dealing transactions. Victoria's legal team negotiated a settlement. She surrendered 20% of her shares back to the company, paid $2.4 million in restitution, and accepted a lifetime ban from serving as an officer in any publicly traded organization. During the fourth week, Sarah Vance came back as Veteran Hiring Coordinator. Her first initiative was proposing a memorial scholarship in Dad's name. $50,000 annually for veterans pursuing careers in technology. I approved it without hesitation. In the second month, Michael Torres successfully challenged NDA in court. It was voided in its entirety. He returned as lead developer with a 30% compensation increase and a new title, Chief Technology Officer. In the third month, the training center sale was legally reversed. Pinnacle Development LLC was dissolved. The building reopened with expanded programming, now featuring complimentary childcare during evening sessions so parents could participate without barriers. By the fourth month, Meridian's quarterly earnings reflected 23% growth. We'd brought 47 veterans on board. Productivity metrics were climbing, internal culture had transformed. The company our father had built was breathing again. 6 months after that boardroom morning, I stood in the training center's main hall watching graduation ceremonies for 32 students completing our coding program. 19 were veterans, 13 were single parents from communities that typically don't receive this kind of investment. All 32 had accepted employment offers, 8 joining Meridian directly, 24 placed with partner organizations. Sarah stood at my side. Your father would be proud. He'd be proud of the work you're doing, I said, redirecting the credit where it belonged. Martin approached with his characteristic directness, uniform, impeccable. Miss Anderson, someone at the front entrance is asking for you. Victoria. I hadn't spoken to my sister since the day of the board meeting. Her messages had arrived in waves, furious at first, then increasingly desperate, then silence. Our mother had offered to help facilitate a conversation. I'd declined. That account was settled. "Tell her I'm not available," I said. "She says she wants to apologize." I sat with that for a moment. The conclusion I'd envisioned hadn't included any path toward reconciliation. But I also held on to something Dad had told me once, that forgiveness isn't an obligation, but a door can remain unlocked without being thrown open. "Tell her I'll meet with her," I said at last, "in 3 months, after she completes the financial ethics program the SEC has required, after she demonstrates genuine behavioral change through consistent action, not just words." I paused. "And only after she volunteers 20 hours at the Veteran Services Center. Not as a gesture toward me, as a step toward herself." Martin acknowledged this and left. Sarah looked at me with one raised eyebrow. "That's more than generous." "It's conditional," I clarified. "If she wants redemption, she has to earn it through what she actually does. Whether she follows through remains entirely to be seen. There's no longer any room in my life for the version of her that caused all this damage. But people are capable of genuine transformation when they commit to the necessary work. Dad believed that. It's the reason he created second chances for veterans in the first place." The ledger was now balanced, the company was stable and moving forward, the mission had been fully restored. And I was finally leading the organization my father had always meant to build, one where financial success and human dignity shared the same foundation.